So thank you all once again for joining this session. Today, we'll be talking about the need for smart buildings in post-COVID times. And of course, this is part of our webinar series that we've been organizing for a couple of months now. So before I get started, my name is Onyema Udeze, and I'm the co-founder of Blaze. And of course, Blaze is a BIM consultancy and IT integration outfit based in Nigeria. And before I start, I'll tell you a bit about myself. So I'm an architect by profession. I had my BSc and MSc program in Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. And so when I finished my architectural program, I actually digressed into so many other things. So I would just consider myself as an architect by profession, but by experience, I'm involved with a whole lot of other things. So when I finished from school, I first of all worked as a system designer for a home automation company based in Nigeria for well over 2 years. And after that, I left to focus more on Blaze. So within the short period of time I've been in the industry, I've been able to do a couple of other things. Last year, I published a book titled Essentials of Smart Buildings Technology, which is currently available on well over 15 different ebook stores. And then on the more technical side of things, I'm also very much involved in BIM modeling. So I'm an certified professional for Revit architecture, also for Revit MEP, both electrical and mechanical disciplines. And then, of course, I also volunteer for BIM Africa Initiative, which is a Pan-African membership-based organization charged with BIM awareness and implementation across Africa. So as an architect, I'm an open-minded architect that loves to see ways we can leverage technology to solve the problems in our industry and, of course, in our environment at large. So before we get started, I'd like to appreciate everyone because in recent times, there have been a lot of online activities, a lot of webinars and everything going on online. So for you to be here today, it's actually a pleasure to have you here. And of course, today we'll be talking about the increased need for smart buildings. So before we even talk about buildings, I will first of all we'll talk about technology generally. I mean, look beyond the industry and look at technology, the way technology has been reshaping our environment. So for me to drive that point home, I will start by sharing a story with you. You know, back in the early 70s, the way we see technology today wasn't the case back then. Back then, technology was more of a necessity for the commercial sector. You know, you have the likes of the Big Blue, IBM back then that leveraged technology to solve their commercial problems. You know, they had these dedicated rooms for mainframe computers that had little to no processing power. So then technology wasn't really the way we use it today. Today, technology is more of an everyday commodity. So back then, why they saw technology, why these big titans saw technology as a commercial necessity. Then a new breed of entrepreneurs, a new breed of tech enthusiasts began to come into the scene, and then they began to change that status quo. I mean, a remarkable example is a company called Apple that back in that early 70s began to promise technology to an average person. You know, they began to inform people that you can actually have your own personal computer. That was something that was unimaginable back then. So because of that, these big titans began to feel threatened by these small startups and these small guys that are just struggling on the streets. And it got that serious that IBM had to reach out to even Microsoft to sign up a deal because they needed to have something that those small guys didn't have, which is something called an operating system. Right. So that was basically how technology started to become more personal. But by the time you fast track from that early 70s to 2007, you realize that was when Apple, the same Apple, after the founder has left and came back and reignited the vision again, they launched the first iPhone. But by the time you look at between 2007 to date, you realize that so much has taken place in our industry. I mean, not just in the industry, in our world generally. Today, with your iPhone, there's basically nothing you cannot do for your iPhone. If you want to travel, you can even book for your reservation ahead of time from your phone. When you get to where you're going, you can easily pull out your phone and order a ride. You're hungry, you pull out your phone and order for food. So technology is basically part of us today when you compare it to the everyday life. So when you look at technology, you now begin to realize that technology in itself is not the end, but it's actually a pathway to solving our problems in industry. So it's just a means to an end. So, but if you look at the environment we find ourselves today, so much has happened in the past 6 months with the pandemic that we find ourselves in. A lot of things have happened, and even the need for technology is beginning to increase even further. A lot of things we are doing today is moving to the cloud. I mean, these webinars, if you go online today, there are so much webinars ongoing, there's so much panel discussions, so much events, everything is moving online. Even the way we work and the way we do a lot of things today is moving to online. So you realize that this technology the need for technology to become a part of our lives is even getting much more increased. So that's why I said here that if there's any such thing as post-COVID, we don't know how long COVID-19 will last or if it's going to be part of us forever. But if there's any such thing as post-COVID, then today we pretty much live in the cloud. Right. So having talked about technology generally, well, now you might be wondering what this has got to do with buildings. So let's even look at buildings. Realize that buildings is an integral part of our everyday lives. I mean, when you look at it, you realize that we spend practically up to 90% of our lives in buildings. I mean, we are born in buildings, all of us. There's hardly anybody that's born on the streets. It's either you're born in a hospital or maybe during even as far back as the Israelis, they used to give birth at home, or wherever it is, you're likely giving birth to in a building. And you are raised in a building, you get educated in a building, you eat in a building, you sleep in a building, you enjoy yourself in a building, you work in a building, develop, everything you do is practically in a building. In fact, when you're not in a building, you're most likely transiting to another building. It's either you're leaving your home and going to work, or you're leaving from work and going to a church, or you're leaving from church, going to get entertained somewhere, and all that. Most of our activities are done in buildings. So you realize that buildings is an integral part of our life. So I realized that it's actually about time that we begin to see buildings as just passive elements, passive structures that will construct, and it just become passive. Because if these buildings does not contribute positively to our environment, then it's going to contribute negatively. Today, the build sector constitutes as much as 50% of the toxic waste that we generate in the world today. They consume as much as 40% of the resources and energy that's being consumed in the world today. Buildings consume a lot and they also generate a lot. So it's actually about that time that we began to look at ways to make these buildings much more intelligent, and most importantly, how to actually leverage technology to make these buildings a lot more efficient. So having said that, what exactly is a smart building, or what is smart building technology per se? So according to a book written by James Napoli, he defined smart building technology as the process of conceiving, designing, constructing, commissioning, operating buildings, leveraging technology to optimize the goals and objectives of the built environment. So when you look at this definition here, there are two things that will catch your attention. The first one is that smart building technology is a process that spans across the entire life cycle of a building, right from the conception stage all the way to the operations and maintenance phase of a building. Right, that's the first aspect of this definition. And then the second aspect is that you are leveraging technology to optimize the goals and objectives of your environment. So this is also another indicator that technology in itself is not an end, but is a means to actually make buildings a lot more smart. So basically, you are leveraging technology to optimize the way people experience and use buildings. So that basically is a definition of a smart building technology. But for the sake of this presentation, we're going to focus our attention on the maintenance and the operations phase, which I refer here as human-centric buildings. Right. So when you look at the way buildings are being designed, or the way we experience buildings today, you realize that a lot of times we look at buildings as just passive elements that we just construct, and they are just there to provide shelter for us. But buildings actually affect our lives in a lot of ways. And so for the sake of that, we are going to be looking more on the operations phase of a building and how we actually experience this building, the user experience of this building. So in as much as smart building technology encompasses the entire life cycle of building, all the way from the design to the operations phase, we are going to be looking more at the operations phase of a building, which is why I tend to say the human-centric side of buildings, or the emphasis is on the facility management phase of building. All right. So having defined all that, then let's even look at what some of the technology systems that make this human experience, or this human-centric side of building, that bring it to life. So basically, when looking at buildings are comprised of a lot of elements. You're talking about the structural elements, but beyond the structural elements, for these buildings to actually be smart and enhance the lifestyle of the users, there are different technology systems that are integrated into buildings. And these technology systems, like we mentioned, they're not end products, but rather they are services that enhance the experience in the building. They are means to an end. So basically, we are talking about technology systems in building. You realize that in recent times, most people refer to it as building Internet of Things. And this is because a lot of these technology systems are becoming IP enabled, and their data and their information is being fed to data, and with that, most of these buildings can be managed remotely. So these are just a breakdown of some of those technology systems. The first one I have here is the energy and the comfort systems. When talking about energy and comfort systems, we're talking about such technology systems as the HVAC, or in this part of the world, there's actually no heating. So you're talking about the cooling systems that you find in building. You're also talking about such systems as the electric power management system. You're also talking about such systems as the smart lighting system. So these are the systems that account for the energy as well as the comfort of the energy. So these are systems that consume quite a lot of the energy that are going to be. Those are the energy and comfort system. And then also talking about the entertainment system. So these are the systems that make the living experience much more entertaining. You're talking about such systems as audio and video distribution systems in buildings. You're talking about such systems as virtual reality in building, gaming solutions in building that actually enhance the way people experience building, especially in this millennial and Gen Z age that we find ourselves in today. A lot of youth today actually enjoy being entertained. Most of the things we do to the social media and everything is all about entertainment, right? So there are also technology systems in building that help to enhance this entertainment in our buildings. And then you also have the security system. Talking about security system, we're talking about both the physical security and cyber security. In fact, when it comes to smart buildings, the concern is more on cyber security because, like I mentioned, all these technology systems are more of IoT devices that are now IP enabled that can now feed information to the cloud. So because when it comes to buildings, especially, you are talking about both information technology and also operation technology, there's a lot of gaps, a lot of possibility for cyber criminals to infiltrate these buildings. You're talking about your fridge, for example, being IP enabled. You're talking about your fan being IP enabled. These are ways that cyber criminals can even easily infiltrate these buildings. So when it comes to smart building technology, we're talking about security systems. The focus is more on the cyber security. So yeah, talking about making use of such things like firewalls to protect these buildings, and also checking for system integrity at all times to ensure that these buildings are well secured every time. Then talking about physical security also, you're talking about such systems like the IP surveillance system, like the CCTV cameras you find in building, the access control systems, even fire alarm system, and so many other systems that trigger when something goes wrong in the building. These are some security systems you find in building. And they also have the communication systems. Communication systems, I mean, right now we are communicating. This can as well be taken care of by a teleconference system in a building, whereby you have maybe your Zoom could connect to your speaker in your building and then connect to a big screen on your building, and then with that can communicate both within and outside of the building. So you also have such system as the IP telephone system that can be either audio communication or video communication. There are so many communication systems you can find in buildings today that actually enhance the way people communicate, especially now that a lot of things are being carried out remotely. The need for this communication system is actually being increased. And then of course you have the management and utility system. So under here, you're not talking about such systems as the building management system, the facility management system, even such system as the healthcare system, or things like irrigation system, or the utilitarian system that actually helps to manage and maintain these facilities. These are the management and utility systems. And then of course you also have the lifestyle system. Talking about lifestyle system, you know, you are more or less, it's been predicted that by 2025, 75% of the workforce is going to be comprised of millennials. So when you're talking about millennials, you're talking about people that like to express themselves through a lot of things, talking about social media, talking about so basically lifestyle system are those systems that enhance lifestyle in these buildings. And we're talking about lifestyle, we're talking about such things as wearables and smart gadgets. I mean, today you can watch movies with your VR glasses, you can issue commands with your voice, with your home assistant and all these building assistant I find in industry today. These are things that kind of enhances the overall lifestyle of people in the buildings. And then last but not the least, you also have the control system. So control system is very important because this is a system that brings together all these other technology systems. Because when you look at our industry, you realize that a lot of things are disintegrated. The way we design and deliver buildings is through a very integrated approach. So when it comes to technology integrations in buildings, most of the times they're also done in a very, very disintegrated manner. Such a way that you can go to the market today, you find a very fancy TV that is IP enabled, you bring it to your home. You go out tomorrow, you find a very fancy speaker that is IP enabled, you bring it to your home. So, but control system is what actually helps to unify all these technology systems and then offer a common control gateway, more or less. So in industry today, there have been different approaches to bringing about control of buildings. You have some solutions from what are called the GAFA conglomerate, the likes of Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. They have some control systems that you find in buildings today. And then on the other end, you also have solutions from what are called the audiovisual industry, which is, so you have some solutions from the likes of Control 4, Crestron, and the like. These are control systems that also helps to control this building. But even more recently, there have been a more holistic approach to controlling this building, whereby you have the likes of Siemens with a solution called MindSphere, which we'll talk about much more later, that offers is an open source platform that harmonizes all these Internet of Things devices, and through that harmonized platform, can now begin to offer some services to users of buildings and building owners. So these are some of the technology systems that actually makes this user experience in building much more enhanced. And then we'll now look at some of the trends that also make this user experience even much more enhanced. So here we are talking about some emerging trends and some trends that have been in place over time. So I've also listed out about 5 different trends that you'll find today in the industry. The first we have here is what is called data connectivity and analysis. So talking about all these technology systems, you realize that most of them, because they're IP enabled, they are dealing with data, which of course is referred to there as BIoT, Building Internet of Things. Because the things are working with data and they're also working through Internet Protocol, which is an open source protocol, you realize that the more important thing is not the data that is contained in these technology systems, but the analysis and the insights that come from those insights and the analytics, and then the insights that come from those analytics. So for you to be able to analyze all the data that is coming from all these diverse devices, and then being able to make much more informed decisions. For example, the facility manager can analyze the technology system, for example, can analyze a space and find out that maybe the air quality is not optimal, for example. These are some insights that can generate from all this connectivity or all these connected devices. So that is one trend we find here. Being able to connect these devices and then do some analysis and generate some useful insights from them. And then of course we have the digital twin concept, which basically, talking about digital twin in a very simple manner, has to do, in a very simple explanation, basically has to do with collaboratively generating the BIM model of a building, which you realize that talking about BIM model, building information modeling, it has to do with all the professionals coming together at the early stage of a building to harmonize and generate the BIM model. So with this BIM model, you have an accurate presentation of that facility, which most time refers to as the static data of the facility. And then this static data, you can now begin to add some more technology system like live sensors to this building that also generate what is called the dynamic data. So by the time you combine the static data coming from the BIM model with dynamic data coming from the operations and maintenance phase of a building, you have a much more accurate presentation of that building. And with that information, you can begin to adapt the buildings and the spaces within those buildings to the experience and to the needs of the end user. So this is the whole idea of digital twin. So you realize that the essence of having a digital twin is to improve the facility management and the user experience of this building. And then of course, we're talking about security as well. I've mentioned about cyber security before. So talking about this trend, you're also talking about making use of things like firewall to ensure that the security of the smart building is always enhanced at every point in time. So this also has to do with also ensuring that you are checking for every technology system and ensure that their integrity is always intact. So these are some trends we find in the industry. So sometimes this comes as services as well from different vendors in the industry today. And then of course, the fourth one we have here is the predictive operation and maintenance. So talking about predictive operation and maintenance here, you realize that in a traditional facility management that we find in the industry today, you realize that when a building is being designed, delivered, and handed over, the facility manager, even in the most advanced case, generate what is called the Kobe spreadsheet, which is generate a Kobe for managing that facility, which is a spreadsheet that can now be used to manage that facility. That's a very traditional way. And then even in more advanced scenario where you have the 3D model of the facility, you might convert that 3D model to what is called the industry foundation class or an IFC file that you can now import into a facility management solution. Most of these solutions I will find today, they are very reactive in the sense that you are trying to wait for things to happen in the building before you now react. But when you have enough data and information about those facilities, you can begin to predict what will happen. You have enough information about every component in that building, the manufacturers, their warranty dates and all that, and you can even monitor their performance. Is there any leakage somewhere? And with that, you can begin to predict what can possibly happen, both with real time and the historic data. So this is also where analytics come in. With the analytics, that will serve as historic data. And then with what you are seeing from your live data at the moment, you can begin to make much more information. That will now serve as predictive maintenance for this building. And then last but not the least I have here is environmental sustainability. So talking about environmental sustainability, you realize, like I mentioned earlier, buildings consume a lot of energy and at the same time generate a lot of waste in our industry today. So by the time you have a lot of smart solutions in buildings, you can help to minimize the amount of energy that this building consumes and also helps to minimize the amount of waste that this building consumes. So typically this starts from the design stage. When you're even designing buildings, you are already at the conceptual stage, you're already looking at how these buildings will affect the environment and ensure that, such things as the orientation of the buildings, the shading devices in the buildings, and all those things. Those are the things you find with your design and BIM software. But even beyond that as well, when you get to the construction phase, you're also making sure that you're using the right systems. And when it gets to the operations phase as well, you're also integrating a lot of smart data that with all those things, you help to ensure that these smart buildings help to minimize the impact that our buildings are having on the environment today, which is actually becoming a bigger concern as there are so much of environmental changes that we are experiencing in recent times. So these are some of the trends that actually help to enhance human experience in buildings. So this is just more of a background to the whole idea of technology and smart building technology, because we've talked about the increased need for smart buildings in recent times. You need to lay a background of what has happened. So when you look at the past 6 months, like I said, so much has happened. I mean, some people say that what has happened in the past 6 months typically takes about 10 years to take place. I mean, there have been so much digital transformation in the industry that it normally should take about 10 years for all this to happen. I mean, our daily routines have actually changed. What we do on a daily basis is beginning to change due to the lockdown and so many things we find in our lives today. So you see that our day-to-day activities are actually changed. The way we even work, in recent times there have been that increased acceptance of working remotely. These are some of the new things we are beginning to see, and even the people who consider heroes in the world today are beginning to change. It's no more the titans and the security people that, the military people that we consider heroes today, but the new heroes are actually the healthcare workers, the delivery people, and all those people that are still trying to make our life sustainable despite the whole lockdown and pandemic. And then even the way we move around today, where people are becoming more conscious about things like social distancing and making sure that the way they move and connect with people is being changed, and even the way we connect with people as well. So much have changed. The way we do business, our experiences, and even the way we imagine and come up with our designs and everything. So much is beginning to change. And how do we think buildings can actually help to even make this much more efficient? So then the question I have for you is, what is your new normal like? So what have actually changed, and how do you think that buildings can support those changes? Because from the way it looks, it doesn't look as if the transformation that have taken place in the past 6 months that are going to likely go back to the way things used to be. It's very much likely that a lot of things that have changed will become the way they are currently. So what is your new normal, and how do you think buildings can support this? So this is where we now begin to look at some of the solutions that can be integrated into buildings to ensure that these buildings actually adapt and meet our requirements in this new normal that we'll actually find ourselves in. So the first one I have here is the idea of space utilization and physical distancing. So talking about space utilization, this can be viewed from two different angles. The first one has to do with leveraging these technology systems you find in building to ensure that they meet the needs and requirements of the users of those spaces. And then the second angle also has to do with how the spaces are being utilized. If you look at a lot of commercial buildings today, you realize that there are so many spaces in those buildings that are underutilized most of the time. For example, if you look at a typical company and take the boardroom, for example, you realize that about 90 or 80% of the time, that space is not being utilized. So how can you leverage technology systems to ensure that every space in those buildings are being optimally utilized, and also ensuring that the user experience in those spaces are also optimally utilized? So this is where space utilization begins to come in. So this basically has to do with leveraging technology systems. We're talking about such things as the cooling systems in this building, ensuring that the air quality in the building is optimal at every point in time. With these, it's been realized that COVID-19, for example, sometimes can transmit through the air, and this can be increased when you have a very low humidity in a space. So how do you ensure that the space is not too dry, that can easily aid the transfer of pathogens or viruses in the space? So these are things that you can use very interesting and intelligent technology systems to ensure that the conditioning of those spaces are optimal for the users on the space, and also the distancing between the spaces as well. How do you ensure that this distance between people in the spaces are also optimal? I mean, social distance is something that is likely going to be with us for a very long time. So even the way we design buildings might likely have to change. So how do we ensure that these spaces, the utilization, and also the experience that people have in those spaces are optimized? Those are the things we're talking about when talking about space utilization and physical distancing. And then the second one I have here is down the improved air quality and room automation. So this a bit ties back to the previous one, which is space utilization and physical distancing. So we're talking about air quality in spaces. We're not talking about, like I mentioned earlier, ensuring that the humidity level in spaces are okay, ensuring that maybe the dampers are shut off when they're not in use, and also as well as ensuring that the devices in those spaces are also shut off when they are not being used so that the energy consumption is minimized. For example, a lot of the new gadgets we're having today are actually powered by what is called power over Ethernet. So they don't have their own dedicated adapters or their own power packs to receive power. For example, your CCTV camera or your IP surveillance camera, or even your telephone, your IP telephones, for example, they just get their power from the Ethernet cable, for example. So these are the things that also helps to minimize the energy consumption and also the overall experience you find in those spaces. And when you're talking about room automation, you're also talking about leveraging such systems as the smart lighting system, for example, to ensure that the lighting level in spaces is optimal. When the space is not being utilized, maybe after 10 minutes or 20 minutes, all the lights will go off, and then when someone is coming, the sensors can sense human presence and automatically turn off. So these are ways to ensure that everything is kind of automated, and then all this helps to reduce the amount of energy that buildings actually consume. And then talking about safety and security, this also still boils down to cyber security. In buildings, when you're talking about safety and security, you're also talking about monitoring human access into the building. These are certain as the access control systems. You can monitor who is coming into the building and who is also going out of the building. For example, some companies currently, they even have digital badges for their staff, and with that, they can monitor the activities both within and outside of the building. So all this helps to ensure that safety of people within those buildings are optimized at every point in time. So these are areas where technology systems can actually help to aid the way buildings are being utilized and managed. And of course, talking about cybersecurity also has to do with ensuring that all the systems, their integrity is always in check, and ensure that everything is optimal at every point in time. So, and then last but not the least, you're also talking about the remote and wireless connectivity. So talking about the remote and wireless connectivity, this is because most of these technology systems are also IP enabled. So it's possible that the management of these facilities can be taken care of remotely, so that the facility management company or whoever is responsible for managing those facilities can actually carry those management and tracking remotely without necessarily coming to the facility and contributing to the activities going on in the building. And then we're talking about wireless and touchless connectivity. We're talking about making use of wireless devices as against wired connections. For example, you can have your lift, for example, make use of touchless solutions whereby the human contact gets reduced, and also in that case helps to minimize the spread of any kind of infection or anything in the building. And even wireless connectivity, also talking about making use of instead of using wired connections like your cable connections, you're making use of Wi-Fi and all those wireless technologies. So these are some solutions that can actually aid to ensure that buildings become smart and help to reduce some of the spread of infections that is possible in this COVID time. And you realize that when you look at this, you realize that technology in itself is still just an enabler to solving all these problems and not an end in itself, like we've seen in other sectors. So having mentioned that, you might be wondering, some of these things I'm saying, are there really solutions in the market that are already solving these things? Of course, there are solutions in the market, and like I mentioned, there are solutions that are coming from the likes of Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and the likes. There are solutions coming from the audiovisual industry like the Crestron, Control 4, and the likes. But then I also mentioned of an interesting solution from Siemens, which is called MindSphere. So MindSphere is a cloud-based open operating system for Internet of Things, and that came from Siemens. So when you look at this, you realize that there are three major layers to this architecture. You have most of the IoT devices in buildings, all these technology systems at the lower layer of this, and then you now have the MindSphere in the middle, harmonizing all these technology systems. So through the open platform, that also allows different vendors to also build on this existing platform and then build solutions that can connect all this ecosystem of IoT devices we find in buildings today. And then from this platform, you can now begin to offer all forms of services to the users and the end users. So you can check out MindSphere from Siemens. It's a very robust solution that actually helps to harmonize of these technology systems. And when you actually look at our industry and compare it to sister industries like the telecom industry or the automobile industry, you realize that when for example, if you take your smartphone and can compare it to a building, you realize that every single system that is inside that smartphone was thought of holistically during the design stage of the phone, for example. When it comes to our industry, you realize that even people that are not professionals in our industry are the ones providing solutions for us. And at the end of the day, it can be very disintegrated. So with a solution like MindSphere, you begin to bring together all these technology systems, and now from there, you can begin to build on this and offer different forms of services to end users in the building. So you might not be wondering how we at Blaze actually comes into this. So like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation, I said that we are a BIM consultancy and IT integrations outfit based in Nigeria. So when you're talking about BIM consultancy, we have quite a number of services. For example, we help firms to strategically implement digital transformation. When it comes to talking about digital transformation, we're basically talking about implementing technology and trying to solve both the internal and external challenges that firms face in their industry. And of course, we also have BIM projects services, whereby we offer different sorts of services like BIM modeling services and also things like BIM execution planning, and basically integrating solutions that help firms to improve the way they work and their internal and external processes. And then, of course, we also have BIM objects creation, whereby we help firms to create BIM objects now, standardize their families, their templates, and so that their BIM deliverables become a lot more standardized. So these are some of our BIM solutions that we have in the industry. And then even much more recently, we launched these free BIM maturity assessments. If you visit our website, blazeinc.net, you can actually measure how your level of maturity when it comes to BIM. So because BIM has disrupted the industry in a lot of ways, it's important that you actually know your level of maturity. I mean, what is your level of BIM implementation? So when you visit our website, blazing.net, you can actually take a very free BIM maturity assessment, and it's just about 6 different questions that will test your level of implementation and knowledge of BIM. And then when you're done with that test, you receive your report instantly. So it's something that you also might want to check out. But beyond our offline services, we also have a lot of different contents online, whereby these are just like this webinar we're hosting now. This is just one of the channels whereby we are trying to bridge the knowledge gap we find in our industry, because there's really a lot of knowledge gap in our industry today. And through other organizations like BIM Africa, we've been also trying to fill those gaps. So these are some different channels we have that we use to reach out and fill those gaps. So the first one I have here is that I have a free YouTube channel. We have a free content, video content, which is available on our YouTube channel. So if you visit our YouTube channel, which is Blaze Academy on YouTube, you can also watch some free. So like this webinar is being recorded. At the end of this webinar, it will be put on our YouTube channel for free that you can always watch. And then of course, we also have premium video contents. Last month, we launched an online academy whereby we converted a lot of our contents to video courses, and then it's also there at very affordable rates. And then we also have a Medium publication that is a thriving publication whereby different thought leaders from different industries, even beyond the construction industry, share their knowledge and views. So of course, everyone that registered for this webinar will share this slide. So all these things I'm saying, all these things you see here, the links to all these things are actually contained. So when you click on this, you will be taken to the various channels that we have. So when you visit our Medium publication, you get to read a lot of things that has to do with technology and how technology can help to fill the gap we find, not just in our industry, but in the environment generally. And then of course, if you visit our website, our blog site, blazetrade.com/resources, you can also get some free digests that are written over time that you can download for free. Those are PDF files that you can easily download and go through on your own time. And then also, we also have some ebooks in different ebook stores. If you visit our website, blazetrade.com as well, /ebooks, you can also see the links to different ebook stores. We have ebooks on Amazon, have ebooks on Apple, have ebooks on Barnes and Noble. There are so many ebook stores, well over 15 different ebook stores. You find the links to all those ebook stores. I can get those ebooks for at a very, very affordable rate. And then on our blog as well, we have a lot of articles that have been written by thought leaders in the industry. And then, of course, we have a podcast channel that is also upcoming. So these are some of the ways that we try to fill the gap we find in our industry, the knowledge gap we find in our industry. But also beyond the threads, beyond this thread, we also try to put our content on other channels. For example, in just last week, we launched a course on Udemy, which is also titled Essentials of Smart Building Technology, which you can also get. For example, if the content you find on our online academy is not affordable enough, Udemy usually offer a lot of discounts, so you can get them at even much more affordable rates on Udemy. So before I even open the floor for Q&A, I would also like to show some of this content and what they look like, so that you can also have a feel for them. So I have here, just a minute, okay. Okay. Sorry. Oh, sorry, just a minute. Okay, I have here just a number of the different channels that we have. For example, this is our ebook platform or our the links on our website that actually links out to different ebook platforms. So when you look here, if you visit our website, okay, this is our yeah. So if you visit our website, blaztrade.com/ebooks, you can actually see the links to this is one of our ebooks that you can see that is available on Amazon, it's available on Google Play Store, and so many of them. So these are links that link off to all these channels. And then of course you have our online academy as well, which is here. So this is our online academy. This is also one of our courses that talks about smart building technology. And interestingly, you can actually enroll for some of these courses and watch some previews. So when you look at this, you see that this is a course that we launched recently that is broken down into three major parts. You have the part one, have the part two, and have the part three, which is about 12 different chapters. And on each of these, you have different video content. So talking about chapter one, each chapter has an abstract, an introduction, and even in the end, you get an extraction from the ebook because this is actually adapted from the original book, and you also get to quiz and testimony. So this is basically what you go through on every chapter, and in the end, you get a certificate. This course is actually certified by Beam Africa, which is our educational partner that can actually get all these courses. So when you finish the course, you get a certificate from Beam Africa. So this is the same course that I also have on Udemy. On Udemy, which is just launched just a few weeks ago. So all these links are actually on the slide. So in your own spare time, you can go through it. So you can see the description about the course, what you learn in the course, and the content as well. So you see that it's just basically the same thing. But when you look at this, see that this is Udemy offering a discount. This is about $13 on Udemy. But by the time you visit our online academy, it's actually about $75. The only difference is that when you finish this on Udemy, certificate is offered by Udemy. But when you finish the one on our online academy, the certificate is from Beam Africa. So you can see that this is well over 5 hours of interactive online video content. So these are just one of the contents we have that we've been able to publish over time. So at this juncture, I will actually open the floor for Q&A. If you have any question, I'll be more than willing to answer. So you can either type your question in the chat box, or you can unmute your mic and ask your question. I'll be more than willing to answer your questions. Okay, so I don't know if anyone has any question. You can either unmute your mic or you can type it into the chat box if maybe you're in a noisy place and you don't want to unmute your mic. So you can ask anything that has to do with smart buildings or all the things I've talked about today. Okay. Okay, I can see that Mr. Peter is raising his hands. Okay, Mr. Peter, unmute your mic kindly. Or you can unmute your mic and ask a question. Peter Odo.
Hello, good evening all. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, but your voice is very faint.
Okay, is it better now?
A bit, yeah, just you can go on.
Okay. I want to first of all thank you for the webinar and the information you've given us. And I appreciate the efforts and thank everyone that took time to listen. Mine is okay. Mine is it's not so much of a question. First of all, just to appreciate what you've done, and secondly, just to these are my personal thoughts on the issue of smart technology and smart buildings, especially when it comes to our climate.
Yeah,
I am of the opinion that prior to before we get to smart buildings, and like we are working with looking at tools to ensure that our buildings are smart, and as much as we offer BIM consultancy services, there is this this disconnect, I would say, between this I might not be getting it right, but this is what I'm feeling, between producing a BIM product, like let's say the BIM models and everything we do, and getting it through, especially in Nigeria, getting it through to even being constructed and finished the way you want it to be. What I'm suggesting or what I'm thinking of is there ways that we can actually focus on getting our buildings built properly and then taking it from there to, making it smart? Because most times what happens in our buildings is that we don't even end up taking the buildings the buildings are not built properly, and then now we are trying to make them smart, which is making the building smart is very good. So my input is, in as much as we are working towards smart buildings and all the efforts you are putting is amazing, it's very good. I think we will also try as much as we can to delve into areas more where we can just make sure that our buildings are at the basic built correctly, which I'm sure you're trying to do with BIM consultancy. So I just said I should open the floor. Well done.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Peter. Yeah, of course. Like I mentioned, when I define smart building technology, I mentioned that it encompasses the entire life cycle of a building. So, which even if you go through the course outline, for example, you realize that a major part of the course of all the things we do still focuses on the design and the delivery of these buildings. But then the only issue with waiting until we get our buildings properly designed and delivered before we start talking about smart buildings is the fact that even when you're talking about smart building, you also need, or about smart building technology, you also need to think about it from the design stage. So of course, I definitely understand this because of the climate, because of the Nigerian climate and all that. It's hard to even talk about the basics, because if you don't get the basic right, you can't be talking about smart building technology. But if at all you really want to make a building, because one of the major challenges you'll find is that when people are talking about smart building technology in this part of the world, is perceived as a luxury. Mostly the entertainment system you find in these buildings. But then when you're talking about smart building technology in much more advanced climes, you are looking at how to actually minimize the energy consumption of these buildings, how to actually minimize the amount of waste coming from these buildings. So it's actually a different thing that, okay, even if you're not talking about smart buildings, or like buildings that will be flying in the air or doing all sorts of wonderful things, it actually has to do with buildings that actually contribute positively to the environment. So I think that is also something that is not, it shouldn't be that expensive, or it shouldn't be something that is very abstract to actually implement, because in the end, it's something that will benefit the users, the clients, and everybody that's involved. So of course, I totally agree and understand with what I agree with what you're saying. I understand what you're trying to, the message you're trying to pass, but it's also important that people perceive smart building technology as something that is more for efficiency and for end user experience, and less for luxury and entertainment, which is mostly the way it's perceived in this part of the world. So thank you for your opinion and comments. So okay, someone typed into the chat box. He said, "Thank you for the presentation, but isn't smart buildings more efficient only if there is constant power supply?" Well, I believe that power supply in its own is also an aspect of smart building technology. I mean, take for example, making use of solar energy, for example, to power buildings. That's on its own is already a smart technology. So trying to solve the issue of power also is also trying to make buildings smart. You can make use of, I'm just saying that you can make use of things like inverters or solar panels and all those things without necessarily powering those buildings from the grid, or just using it as a way to support the grid when there is no power supply. So that's one side to it. And then the second side to it is that there mustn't be a constant power supply for buildings to actually be smart, because like I mentioned, a lot of these technology systems are becoming IP enabled, in the way that the management of those technology systems has to be done remotely. Of course, those systems, they need to be on for them to be tracked remotely, which of course still boils down to power. But if they can be monitored remotely, then it's not directly linked to power at the same time. So I believe that both the power issue in Nigeria is also something that can also be innovated around to also increase the reliability of this building. So if we can support, for example, support the main supply with solar panels and inverters, for example, that can also help to ensure that there is a more reliable supply of energy in those buildings. And those things actually helps to make the building even much more smart. So I hope that at least addresses your question a bit. So I don't know if any other person have any question. If you have any question or any comments, anything you want to add, you can type into the chat box, or you can unmute your mic and ask your question. Okay, I can see Ubo Akban raising her hand. Akban, you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much for an interesting session. I don't know if I'm clear enough.
Yes, I can hear you. Although it's a bit low. I don't know if it's from my side, but I can hear you a bit.
Okay, I was saying thank you for an interesting session. I would love to ask, especially building on what Mr. Peter said about our the basics of it. I just want to know, from a structural engineering point of view, since you have listed some systems that's under this whole smart building technology thing, is there any system that has to do with structural integrity assessment? Because I think we really do need that. So I just want to know, is there any system that deals with structural integrity assessment? Or it's a different thing entirely, like it's not related to this smart building technology?
Okay, yeah, I understand. I think I understand the question a bit. So when talking about structural systems integrity, I believe that is an aspect of the design stage of the building. So we're talking about creating a digital twin, for example, which is basically creating an accurate BIM model. There are so many structural analysis software in the market. You have the likes of Proctor structures, you have the likes of robot structural analysis. There are so many software in the industry today that can be used to analyze the structural stability of this building. Because why is it more important during the design stage is that you don't want to be analyzing the structural stability of a building after it has been constructed. If at all you identify that there's a problem, then it's a bigger problem. It's a bigger problem than just analysis. So yes, of course, that's part of that. To me, I believe that's part of design process, where you have to analyze for your building and ensure that it's actually structurally sound. before you go to site. So I believe that it's part of the advantages that come with building information modeling. So I hope that answers your question.
Actually, not really, but I really do understand what you said here. I was asking because there's usually like structural integrity assessments for an existing structure. That's what I meant. For an existing, yes.
Okay, for an existing structure.
Yes, or
well,
is it out of this?
I believe there are, although most of the technology systems you find today tend more towards the services that go into this building, more of IoT devices that communicate through through a common platform like the internet protocol or through an operating system, more or less. But of course, I'm sure there has to be some systems that can be utilized to analyze the structural integrity of buildings for at least for existing buildings.
Okay, thank
that's
you.
Hello?
A bit beyond the scope.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello? Can I respond to a question?
Okay, yes, you can.
Okay, yes, there are actually sensors that can be used to track seismic activities that happen within a building and during operations as when the building is in use. They can actually use to track kind of like dead loads or even now that smart buildings are not really commonplace. There are buildings that they actually use sensors to track things like the weight of the lift, especially the core areas. They can tell this place is already maxed. It's like no other person to go through. Yes, using IoT sensors and smart technologies encompasses everything about the building industry, especially when it comes to services like he had mentioned, structural integrity. Yes, I mean, I've heard of bridges. I've not seen myself, but I've heard of bridges where they put sensors to like track seismic activities that are happening around that bridge area. Even on the bridge, you use it to track things like loads and movement. Let's say, I mean, some of the stanchions have over time need maintenance. They use it. That's how they track those kind of activities around that area. So I guess that answers your question.
Yeah, I believe so. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Christopher, for the answer. I have a question here from Engineer. Okay, no. I believe. Okay, from Dr. Soyimbe. He's asking, what are the major challenges to use of smart tech in buildings in Nigeria? I believe it still boils down to some of the questions that have been asked, like what Architect Peter have addressed earlier, and also the issue of power. Those are some of the challenges you can find. But of course, even beyond all that, I believe that one of the challenges we perceive them as luxury, because a lot of the buildings you find in Nigeria are quote unquote just 7 shelters, 7 as shelters. So a lot of time they are just thinking about cost. So when you're thinking about cost a lot of time in buildings, it tends to limit the longevity of that vision. Like you are just thinking about, okay, if I put this amount into constructing this building, how much am I going to get in return and all those things. But then when you start thinking that way, you're not thinking about the end user experience. You're not thinking about how much energy that building will consume eventually and how much of impact that building will have on the environment. So the moment you start having those long-term vision, short-term vision, which is typical of our construction industry in Nigeria, it limits how much efficiency that you can invest into that building. So I believe that's a major challenge with the smart building technology in Nigeria, is the fact that a lot of the real estate developers and a lot of the solutions we find in the markets are just thinking about, of course, affordable buildings. But then when you're thinking about affordability, you now also forget that you are making savings in the short term, and then in the long term, that buildings, you spend even much more to maintain that building, because it's estimated that as much as 90% of the expenditure on the building life cycle takes place during the operations phase. So when you're so much concerned about how much it will cost to construct this building and deliver it to the end users, you are now forgetting that by the time you finish delivering that building without taking into consideration most of these things, you begin to spend a lot more. If you as a developer does not spend that money, the people that eventually park into those facilities will spend the money to maintain those things, whereby there becomes a lot of leakages. There's overheating and all those issues. The people in the building, there's no user experience and all that. So I believe it's something that, of course, because of the capital availability as well, that's a bit understandable, but it's until we begin to look at the long-term impacts of all these design considerations that we can also begin to look beyond just our immediate returns and think about the experience of people that are using these buildings. So Dr. Soyinbo, I hope that addresses your question. I also, okay, Mr. Christopher, you want to add anything to that? Hello, Christopher, you're raising your hand. Okay. I have another question here from Wayne NWC. Okay, she's asking, how about smart construction? I'll be opened. Smart construction, of course, that is also an aspect of, to me, it's still an aspect of building information modeling. It's still part of that process of creating the accurate digital twin before you hand over. So the companies like Autodesk, for example, now in recent times, they are beginning to invest a lot of resources into construction. They feel like they've designed a lot of design tools. They've actually created a lot of design tools. They have well over 100 software. So they are beginning to invest into construction. So today you're not talking about remote collaboration, talking about even people on the sites working with so many IoT devices to also ensure safety and increase productivity on the construction site. So those are still, of course, there are a lot of digital transformation going on in our industry. Like I said, this presentation focuses more on the user experience and the operations phase. But of course, there are so many digital transformation in our industry today that spans across the entire building life cycle. And smart building technology, like I mentioned, at definition, encompasses the entire life cycle of these buildings, from design all the way to the operations phase. Of course, smart building construction is also an aspect of that. There are so many solutions in the market that helps to also improve the way we construct buildings today. So I think that's about all the questions I have here. Okay, so I guess that is all. Once again, I appreciate everyone for attending the webinar, because in the past couple of months, there have been so much activities online. There have been so much webinars. In fact, I'm sure that even as this webinar is going on, there are so many other webinars out there. So for it to be here means that you actually value this discussion. And thanks to everyone that have contributed their opinion and also asked any form of question. So this is one of the webinar series that we have, and we intend to keep pushing out more with time. And then also we intend to organize an Revit MEP workshop very soon in Lagos, which is likely going to take place in the middle of next month. So we also communicate everyone about that very soon. So perhaps by next week, we might start seeing some information about that. So thank you all once again for attending this webinar. And between now and tomorrow, the recorded version will be passed across to everyone so that you can also go through it on your spare time. Thank you.